I'm Imani.
Hi, I'm Amari, and you're listening to Twins
Teens
with
ideas
needed for
success.
Yeah.
Hey, you're supposed to say hey with me. Hey. So as you can see, this is not my twin.
I am Amari's conscience.
Okay, we're not going to be weird. So this is my dad, and we're doing the show together because I want to do a show with my dad. So yeah.
She sure did. She asked to do a show with her dad. I was so very honored.
He felt honored. I am just using him. No, I'm kidding. No.
Somehow I believe that.
We're here to teach you today about the 10 Commandments. But first, before we start, we always want to start with prayer. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, and thank you for bringing all those who are watching this show together. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to people and to relate with people. And I just pray that someone gets something out of this show that makes them think, that makes them change in action, and that helps them move forward in their life. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Cool. So anybody that's new to this show, normally I do this show with my twin brother. His name is Amari. Today I'm here with my brother's twin, which is my dad, because they look just alike. But he's my twin because we act just alike. So this show should be pretty fun. So, look at that. So yeah, we're going to just start with the 10 Commandments and see where that takes us. Oh, my mom told me to move my purse.
You can't text in threads while we're
she always texts me.
The show.
She always texts me threads. Now you can be a part of it.
Yeah, I get to see the harassment witness.
Yes. So let's start with this, right? So the 10 Commandments. Dad, let's go through a history of the 10 Commandments. So, where'd they come from?
So now, this is where I'm beginning to realize I was brought here to be used.
He was not. I know the answer to these questions. Moses went on the mountain.
Moses went on the mountain. And actually what happened as a result of the Israelites being set free from the Egyptian people after hundreds of years of enslavement, they were taken into the wilderness and set free. However, when you take a people from hundreds of years of enslavement and take them into freedom in the wilderness, they still may not know how to function on their own. And so the Lord saw fit that these people should receive commandments from him on how to live with him, how to live for him, and how to live by him. And so with that being said, Moses is called up on the mountain. He's given instruction for the people to remain down. As he goes up, God really started off 40 days, him up on the mountain, and there were a whole lot of laws that he was given. But because Aaron and the people, without leadership, they just went on their way and did some things that were not good in the sight of God, Moses had to immediately come down, interrupt that 40 days of fasting and before the Lord. And he came down with the laws, but he got so angry when he saw the false god that was built that he threw them down on the ground, and then the ground opened up, swallowed like a third of the people. And when it closed back up, everybody else was like, yeah, Moses, you the man. If you can't do it, nobody can. And so then everything happened, and then Moses had to turn around and go right back up, which means he didn't just fast 40 days, 40 nights. He also really fasted 80 days, 80 nights, because he went back up on the mountain another 40 days.
See what I mean? Look at that. That was like a minute of history that we all needed, right? So in layman's terms, do you have some?
So about this using spirit, though, I'm just saying. Wait a minute.
It did happen, though. We all are on the same page. I did just get used.
So in layman's terms, basically, right? There's this guy. He came and saved a whole bunch of people from the wrath of their, what was he? Pharaoh. I almost said emperor. From the wrath of their Pharaoh, that was actually his half brother, came and saved the people after God came to him in a bush of fire and was like, hey, you got to go save these people. And so, you know, he was just like this normal guy. And now he's known as the guy that, you know, led people in a wilderness to freedom and, you know, followed the voice of God and wrote these 10 commandments. And so that's the story that we're going to talk about today. And basically what I want to get out of this is a lot of people feel really far removed from the Bible all the time. And they feel like it happened so long ago. The things were written so long ago that they couldn't possibly have anything to do with what we're dealing with now. Or it's like impossible to follow everything in the Bible. It's just not realistic, which is true. We do struggle, especially with the First Testament, with relating that to who we are, relating that to what we do, relating that to what we go through. So I just want to put these, you know, in standards that we can understand. And, you know,
I think that's great. And I think that with that, there's also this question, and not to get too deep, I know we want to keep it very practical, but there's also a question in the world today because of Christ coming into the world. There are lots of people, even Christians, who are not really sure of the place of the 10 Commandments because of some things that Jesus said. Sometimes it's confusing to this group that whether or not we are still living by the law or under the law, as they refer to it. And so some people believe that Christ came, and when he came, he did away with it. Although he says in the Bible that I did not come to do away with it, right? And so people still don't really have a good understanding of what the purpose of those 10 commandments are. Are they still active? Are they inactive? What do we do? And how do we do that? Do we follow them or do we not? And I believe that when you see, and as we go through the 10 commandments, you'll understand that this is a very basic, primitive understanding of who God is. And when I say that, I mean, it is kind of the foundation of our relationship with God and how we're to relate with God and to relate with each other. And so I just wanted to put that out there because I think that going through the 10 commandments, we need to do that a lot more because we would find out that, you know, there is something to them. And hopefully as we go through, people will understand that.
Totally. Okay, so we'll go to the first of the 10 commandments, which I should know by heart, because I learned them in Cornerstone for like 8 years straight, but I don't know them in order.
8 long years.
But okay, so the first, I do remember the first commandment is that you shall have no other gods before me.
The
very first commandment, super important commandment. And we don't really talk about that one as much, but I think that is a super important commandment because it doesn't mean like you should not, it doesn't just mean like don't bow to other gods. Right. And that's kind of how we think of it. Like, you know, don't bow in front of this microphone right here and call it God. And it's like, oh, that's easy to do. That is easy to do. But when it's saying that you should have no other gods before me, it really means that you shouldn't put anything above me on a pedestal. So that doesn't mean that you don't just not worship other things, but it means that you don't put things above God. And so you don't put your relationship with another person before God. You don't put like making money before God. You don't put, you know, all these other things, you know, you don't put your job or you don't put your passion over God. And so those are things that are harder to do than just not bowing to things that we worship, right? Because it's easy for me to say, well, I only worship one God. Like, okay, yeah, I only worship one God. I go to church every Sunday and I worship one God. I pray to one God and all those things. But am I putting other things before him? Am I prioritizing other things before him? And am I putting my relationship with him in jeopardy to foster other relationships or to foster other things? And I think that that's more of what the first commandment means, in addition to the, you know, obvious don't pray or worship other gods.
Right. And I think that that's important to note because you can end up or find yourself in a position where you have done just that, even though you didn't physically bow down or you didn't verbally open your mouth and begin to actually worship another God. When you take your job too seriously, when you put things before God, when you put people before God, when you even put yourself, you know, some of us have fallen into breaking of the commandment, the very first one, just through selfishness. Because there is a way to put your own ideas and your own emotions and those things before the true and living God, before the word of God. So it's so important to understand that you're not doing that because it would be a clear violation of, you know, and this is the one commandment that God actually explains why he doesn't want you to do it. And something you didn't mention earlier. So we're really looking at these through Exodus chapter 20. And you'll begin to see that they're kind of in a cleaned up form. But you'll see that throughout Exodus and Leviticus even, is always this constant re-mentioning of them. So Exodus 20, you hear that, God is like, thou shalt have no other gods for me. And in another place in Exodus, he actually says, because I'm a jealous God. Like, in other words, I'm the only one who's able to do what I do, So why should I contend with something else, when I know that they can't do what I do? And I think it's so important for us to understand when it talks about God being a jealous God. I hear people say, well, that's why I'm jealous, because God's jealous God. We don't have a right to be jealous because we have no possessions. We have no power apart from God that we could actually be jealous or literally be jealous of. But God says that because he reserves the right to say that, because he truly is the only true and living God. And so he says that to them, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Actually, he opens up in Exodus 20 and verse 2, and he lets them know, I'm the Lord your God. I'm the one that brought you out of Egypt, and I'm the one that brought you out of the house of bondage. Now let's talk about commandments. I shall have no other gods before me, right? Because I did all this stuff for you, and no other God was able to do it. And so you should be worshiping me.
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
Sounds good.
See, I know I'm being used, but that's okay though.
He's not though.
It's okay though, because I love her.
A good perspective on things. It wouldn't be the same if I did this by myself.
Okay.
Okay. Commandment number 2. You shall not make for yourself an idol. And so this kind of goes to what I was saying earlier about like not bowing to other things or not, like physically worshiping something else. And so I always think about, is that Babylon? No, God.
Babylon is definitely a place of.
I'm thinking about I don't really know what they built, but in VeggieTales they built a chocolate bunny, and it was Nebuchadnezzar.
Yes, so they built an image to Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah,
they built so it's an image to Nebuchadnezzar, but in VeggieTales they built a chocolate bunny.
Not the chocolate bunny. So it was really just VeggieTales.
The Bible does talk about not to make graven images.
Not to make graven images.
Okay,
I got where
you see where I'm going with that.
I guess that the Easter kind of.
Anyways,
thing.
So they made a chocolate bunny, and they wanted that all of the people to bow to it. And Nebuchadnezzar put 3 Hebrew boys in the fire because they wouldn't bow. And I believe that this scripture kind of speaks to that in a way. I mean, we're not building chocolate bunnies, but part of Christianity, when you like leave your old life behind and become like this new person in this new walk of God, and like thinking like, what would Jesus do, and all of those things, like we can't build other gods. We can't worship other gods. There's one true God. Like,
I found that scripture, by the way.
You found that scripture?
It's Exodus 20 verse 4, which says, thou shalt not make unto thee any this is the King James version, obviously. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on earth beneath, or that is in the waters under the sea.
That's
so, okay, they use the chocolate bunny, but it's still a graven image. We were making of something that we shouldn't have been partaking. So they just, use the chocolate bunny
absolutely.
As kids.
But actually, you really opened up a door there. You talked about
I'm sorry.
chocolate bunnies. Because
of Easter.
And I think,
oh God,
I don't want to speak for VeggieTales, and please, everybody, do not send letters to VeggieTales and all this stuff.
We love VeggieTales.
They were raised on VeggieTales.
We've noticed over the last year and a half. I've noticed.
Yeah, it's so. Please, let me tell you, they know every episode, Larry and all this stuff, right? So that's not what I'm saying. But when you look back on it, the chocolate bunny would be an excellent idea to talk about graven images because of what we do with Easter and the Easter bunny. And these are all things that are graven images. There are some people that believe that the true celebration of Easter really has to do more with those things and those items. They can't celebrate just the truth that Christ died for our sins, was resurrected so that he could then oversee our soul's destiny. And they see that only through the Easter bunny, only through jelly beans, only through Easter baskets. There's no such thing as an Easter basket, like it's just a basket on Easter, right? The same basket becomes a Mother's Day basket when you give it on Mother's Day or Father's Day, right? And so I think that there is something to that, because he's very specific in making sure that you understand what he means by graven image and where you're not to get it from. Not in the earth, not under the earth, not through the earth, not in the sea. I mean, he was very, very specific. So that encounters everything that we know. And so that's a huge point. And I'm actually glad you brought up VeggieTales now.
See?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Can I just say that is actually very specific?
Yeah,
Real
it's
specific on what he
very
says.
very specific. And that's the thing about the Ten Commandments. Sometimes I think we break it down.
Yeah, like the message. You want to know what the message says?
Yeah, we kind of water it, and in your situation, because it was learned and taught to you repetitively as a child. And so I can understand why they would shorten it, summarize it, so that you could internalize it easier. But just knowing that, God is very specific with these commandments. Like, it's not from me.
Right.
So therefore, if you worship and bow down to it, then it's a graven image, because it's not from me.
Exactly.
It's not me.
Wow,
So
the
I think
message
that's
version is
important.
quite interesting, Apostle and Imani. The message version, it seems like it's a little more drawn out, but it says, no carved gods of any size, shape, or form, of anything whatsoever, whether things that fly or walk or swim, don't bow down to them and don't serve them, because I think they're supposed to say, I am God. Oh, because I am God, your God, and I am a most jealous God, punishing the children for any sins their parents pass on to them. Oh, how lovely. To the third, and yes, even to the fourth generation of those who hate me. But I'm unswervingly loyal to the thousands who love me and keep my commandments. That seems like a really drastic different explanation to the
what
first
they
one.
did was they took verse 4 in the King James and verse 5 in the King James and verse 6, and they just put them together.
Got it. Okay.
Because
I
verse
see.
5 gets into your next, which was the third one, I believe, and says, thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. And I think that's what's important to pull out. Now this, it's important to pull that one out, because he's talking about those who hate him. And there's a difference between those who do not know him and those who hate him. Those who do not know him may do some things that look as if they hate him, but it's not taken that way by him, because he understands that they don't know him. But for those who know him and still choose, to do these things against him, he's taking that as, since you know me and you know what I like, and you're choosing to rebel against that, then you must hate me. And he's saying to those, I'm going to visit. But to those of you who love me and keep my commandments, then to you will be shown mercy. So as you can see right there, the importance of the place of these 10 commandments and how we live our everyday lives. Why would God have to change that? Why does Christ coming to the world, why would that change suddenly? Because Christ is in the world, we get to now hate God.
Right.
We get to now, bow ourselves down to graven images, so on and so forth. So I think that that's a great context that you're in. And so you're probably ready to go on. Prophet Blaine and I are having a ball. We don't know about you guys, but
Wow.
we're having a good time.
I'm going to say this kind of off the mic, but would celebrities be like graven images?
Celebrities could very well be graven images. I mean, people idolize them. When you have persons who, are screaming and passing out and spend all of their money, these are persons that won't even give, to people who are in need or even give to the church, but they'll spend all of their money and go into debt just trying to go and see someone at a show. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone who likes celebrities or things like that doesn't mean that they are all bowing down to them or that they're all worshiping them. But many people do worship.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there's a line, and a lot of people do cross it. Like, there's a difference between like respecting an artist or, respecting a craft, and versus like, oh my God, like oh my God, this is my livelihood. If I don't see them, I'm gonna die. Like, or if I have to be like them, buy the things that they buy, look like them. I need to be at every concert, and like, just things that make it a difference, like between respecting or loving a person's art and things like that versus like, this is your livelihood and you can't even live your life functionally. You have to live through theirs.
Yes. Especially if it causes you to do the things that God says not to do. And I think that is so important. So that's a great question. And I think that it's important that people understand that. And I recognize, and I'm going to take this because I am the senior adult here. I'm going to take that because her shows, and the twin shows, they never intend to do anything that is combative or whatnot. But I recognize the seriousness behind what we're actually teaching here. And I want to let you know, you can deflect all of those types of harsh things to me, because what I'm saying is that many of us, even as Christians, are in danger of breaking that commandment because we do things and we skate across that line and not even pay attention to it, and then put it on the grace of Christ, and his love for his people. But I think it's important to understand that he talks, listen to the specificity in which he uses. He talks and says that this is something that can affect thousands of generations, third and fourth generation. This is something that can affect thousands of people across generations, multiple generations. So we really might want to rethink our position if this 10 Commandment business is something that we really need to show honor and respect to today. And I would say yes, just because it goes into different generations, multiple generations, we must use it as our foundation in the Lord.
Cool. So now we're on the third commandment, which is, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Do you want to read that scripture before we get started?
Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain.
So how they taught it at Cornerstone was like, how you be like, oh my God, like you can't say that. That's basically what they said. But as I've grown up, I realized that it does mean that, but it also means don't attribute things to him that don't relate to him, or don't attribute things that did relate to him to things that relate to other people. Yes. Don't give him less credit than he deserves, and don't blame him for things that he had nothing to do with.
Yes.
So that's what I've kind of taken it to mean as I've grown up, along with not using his name out of context, along with not calling on him when you don't need him, or only calling on him when you need him. Those are kind of like the ways that I see it. But what about you?
Well, I know you're right on point. I mean, to trivialize his name, which is to count his name as common. What you have to understand about the Israelites or the Jewish culture is that for them to even whisper the name Yahweh, to even whisper his name, was punishable by death. Like, you could not literally walk around and say his name without praying to him or without worshiping him, right? Praising him. So it was a very serious offense. And again, I'm not saying that it needs to be that serious now, but I will say this. What would be the problem with that? I believe that that is one of those issues that we have today because his name is trivialized so much. People don't have a problem at all, bashing, God or saying, things illegitimate. They even place a cuss word after his name, a curse word after his name to make sure to maximize the size and the proportion of the actual swearing word that they use. I mean, and when you begin to think about it, it's like, if I continue, let me say it like this. One of the things I notice about people when they're getting ready to fight, I can always tell when people are getting ready to fight because the first thing that happens is they begin to dehumanize the other person. They begin to call them out of their name. They begin to lessen their value in their name. They begin to refer to them, you don't know me, you this, you that, and they swear at them, blah, 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 blah. And the reason that they do that is because it is easier to fight somebody when you dehumanize them, when you make them something other than what they truly are. And I believe the same types of things happen. The reason why we have people who don't show any respect to the name of God or to the person of God is because we have taken him and we have brought him down as the deity, not just a deity, but we brought him down as the deity. And, that does go a long way when you talk about calling his name. It's very easy to just see him as any of the other gods that he just said not to worship if his name is so trivial, And so I believe you're right on point. It doesn't, mean, that in a joking way or whatnot that, if I say, oh my God, that, all of a sudden I'm going to be punished because I love him and he knows I love him. However, we, even as Christians, that's what I was saying earlier, that those of us as believers, there are a lot of things that we have picked up just from the world that we probably need to really go and read our Bibles and just kind of get back to some of the basics, because there's nothing wrong with that law. I mean, you understand it fully. And so I think that that's important. And I think that it also moves into not attributing the things of anyone else, to God and vice versa. And I think that's important.
Cool. So now we're on Commandment 4, and it says, remember the Sabbath day and keeping it holy. This is really grainy. So it says, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Do you want to read that verse?
Yes. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
Yeah. So I totally think that this commandment is the one that I've heard the most scrutiny on as a teenager, or even like just as a person. I know a lot of people, this commandment makes them really uncomfortable, because it's like, well, if my job tell me I gotta work, like I gotta work or I'm gonna get fired, which is valid. It's a very valid point. And I would just say that just because you work doesn't also mean that you can't worship. And so if you have to, break that Sabbath, if you have to work, if you need that job, which is completely understandable, that doesn't mean that you can't find time out of your day to find a service somewhere. There are services going on all the time. Now in the age of where we have technology, you can go watch a service that happened in the morning. You can watch it at home. And so I think that there are ways that if you wanted to care, if you wanted to, follow this commandment, that you can make it happen, and that it's not always realistic in a capitalist society, which is what we live in, where you have to make money to take care of yourself, and you have to, continuously do that to take care of yourself and your family. It's very understandable that you would have to work on the Sabbath. But what are you going to do to get around that to still make sure that you are worshiping on that seventh day, and to make sure that you're getting the word that you deserve on that seventh day is what I think really matters.
And so let me add to that, because there's a lot of clarity that goes around, and that's why it's a lot of scrutiny. Because again, when Christ comes in the New Testament, he actually on several different occasions gives the disciples permission to literally go out and get something to eat and to work on the Sabbath day in order to provide for themselves. When he was approached by the scribes and the Pharisees and challenged on that point, he actually brought up that this is, number one, a nation law. It is a nation law, which means the thing that really made it most comfortable was the fact that Moses was talking to all of the people of Israel. So when the Sabbath day came around in Israel, everybody didn't work. Everybody didn't serve. Everybody walked. Everybody removed conveniences, right? And so Christ was saying, he actually said the words that the Sabbath was made for man. Man was not made for the Sabbath. Therefore, in other words, you have to take into consideration that exactly what you said. How do you honor that? So that's the first thing that I want to bring out. And I want to let it be known, people think that because we have service on a Sunday, that we do not attribute to the law of Moses about the Sabbath. And so that's the second part that I want to bring up that I think is so important, that as we talk about the Sabbath day and actual church service or temple worship were two totally different things. They were not told in the Old Testament by Moses that on the Sabbath day to go to church, or to go and hear the minister, or to go and worship in the choir. The true tradition of the Sabbath day, especially after coming out of Egypt, was really centered around keeping it holy. How did they manage to explain keeping it holy? Number one, or I say A, it was done by the things that they did not do. Right? So on that day, on the seventh day, they did not work. They did not exchange monies. They did not do business, because those were the things that they were more inclined. Remember, they just came out of the wilderness. They don't know anything about any of that. So these are the things they were more inclined to actually mess up in. It's none other. So the law was given. Don't do those things. And B, it was also centered around what had taken place, right? It got incorporated in what had taken place in Egypt when the 10th plague came, and they actually flattened the bread. There it is again, that not really working. Don't bake your bread so that it rises and put all that in it. Just make it flat, because in all honesty, you're going to need to be ready to go by the morning, because they're going to come put y'all out, right? And so those things got incorporated. The Sabbath day in the scriptures, as far as it's referring to Exodus, was more about the things you didn't do, and then how did you replace that time? If you even study I'm going to be careful when I say that. If you study the Jewish culture as known of now, it's pretty much traditional to then. They spent time with their families, just like they did on that day of the Passover. They kind of got mingled in together. They spent time with their family. They read the Torah together, right? They had dinner together. They did those types of things, and they had time to do it because they didn't work and they weren't doing business transactions. So I want to make sure that we separate that. We are free to worship God every single day on any given day. And I am one of the biggest proponents for an understanding and a pushing of Sabbath day experience. The third part of that is it just talks about 6 days going past, seventh day, using it as the Sabbath. But how many of you can know that our American calendar and our American day system is not the same as Israel's. And it most certainly is not the same before Christ even came, right? So who's to say that that was a Saturday back then? Or who's to say that that was a, so even when we say the seventh day now, we're talking about based upon our calendar. But in all honesty, we could all be wrong. Because the seventh, what if the seventh day that we call Saturday was actually the third day back then of the week? So I don't think that it's meant to be in the letter. Jesus talks about it, and Paul talks about it, the letter killeth, right? The spirit gives life. So I think that's, I wanted to spend a lot of time around that one, because a lot of times as Christians, we get flack. You guys just don't really understand the Bible, and you don't tell people to follow the commandments, this, none other. Nothing could be further than the truth. We actually not only teach the 10 commandments, we stand on them. They are the foundation of our faith in our God. And so when it gets around the Sabbath day, I get really passionate because people have built entire denominations off that. Seventh-day Adventists, other people. And I'm not knocking, if that's, how you interpret it and that's how you believe it, that is wonderful. But I am saying to you that when you really begin to delve into it, the Sabbath day one is really tricky. And so we need to approach it with the same amount of grace which Christ approached it and explained it even to the scribes and the Pharisees. And it's that kind of grace that's given to us because love trumps all.
Yes.
I know. I don't want you to take the heat for that one. I want to.
Yeah, I don't even know what just happened, but
exactly.
The next commandment, number 5, is honor your father and your mother. And isn't that the one that also says, because if you do, your days will go long or something like that?
Well, actually,
it's my grandma's favorite scripture ever to quote.
Actually, that's elder
else?
part is not. Yeah, not in this particular verse. It just says, honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee. So it's restated the way that you said it in the New Testament, but that's pretty much the spirit.
Yeah, so this commandment, your parents probably tell you it all the time. My parents tell me it all the time. So is my grandma. But I think that it is important because in culture right now, in this quote unquote millennial culture, which is the word millennial now really seems to be more of an insult than a title at this point. But I do think that in this culture, a lot of times there's a lot of people who want to be friends with their parents, or parents that want to be friends with their children. And so the respect just isn't there, which is really disheartening because I wasn't raised like that. And I know a lot of my friends that weren't raised like that, but it just seems like there's a disconnect between the line where you're cool with your parents, but they're still your parents, And so I think that this one is really important. And when you say honor your father and mother, you're basically saying respect them. They are people that gave you life, that continue to help foster you and feed you, teach you how to talk, put you in schools, pay for legitimately everything, what I told my mom the other day is I put their life on halt by 18 years. 18 years I have been the only thing that they had time to care about. Yeah, they had jobs, they had friends, but for 18 years they had to worry about what I was going to eat every night, where I was going to be every day, what I was going to do if I got sick, if I went to school, where I went to school. These are things imagine not being able to even think for yourself without having to think about another person, let alone 2 other people at the exact same time, and 4 when there were 4 of us in the house. And so I think the least that we can do is honor our parents and respect our parents. I think that's really important because a lot of people are oh, my parents are so annoying. They do this, they do that. Whatever they do, think about how much worse the situation you can be. And think about the people who are born and their parents pass away, are born and their parents leave them, are born and their parents, abuse them, hurt them, harm them. But you have parents that love you, that care for you and things like that. And so I think that just respecting the people that gave us life and continuously pour into us is super, super important. It's probably like one of the commandments. They say the most commandment is love thy neighbor as thyself, and the greatest of these is love. But I think that loving your parents and respecting your parents comes like right after that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really...
You're biased. You don't get to talk. It's like, no.
I'm just amazed really at your understanding of that. Like, wow. I was just talking to somebody today about how that's really the way it is. If a parent is not a real parent, if they haven't put their lives on hold, and I think that the only thing I'll say about that is the honor factor. Honor is like love. Is different than respect, only in the essence that you can respect someone and never do anything. You can respect someone and never really show it. But to honor someone, you have to actually show the respect. You have to show the esteem. And I think that that's what it means. Now, it's the only commandment out of the 10 that are given here that talks about what to do and not what not to do. All the others start with thou shalt not. This is the only commandment in the 10 commandments that basically starts with thou shalt. And I think that that's important because it's the one that carries through to the New Testament. Nobody challenges that. Nobody challenges that at all. We only really challenge the ones that have to do with our understanding of God. But now we're getting into relationships with people, relationships with each other, and things we ought to do with each other. And so I just wanted to point that one out. And by the way, my children do a wonderful job at honoring us. And I'm not just saying that because she's sitting here. I'm saying that because it's true. And the thing about it is that even people that aren't in your family, that do not live in your house, they can tell when your children honor you. And I have nothing but people who come to me in full respect because they honor their parents. They force their friends and other young people to honor their parents. Even those who may not honor the direct relationship that they have with their own parents. When they come to us, there's always honor. There's always respect shown. And so I thank them for really following that commandment. And as Forrest Gump said, that's all I got to say about that.
Okay, so we have 5 more to speed through, okay?
All right, speeding through.
So what the heck does it say? Oh, I know what it says. It says you shall not do murder, which is pretty self-explanatory. Don't kill each other.
Thou shalt not kill.
Thou shalt not kill. Shalt not.
Shalt not.
Shalt not. Yeah.
You would think. But again, you got to remember, we're talking about a slave people. We're talking about a people who
almost like savage.
They had the only rules they had to live by were the rules of the pagan people that enslaved them. And one of the rules in that pagan society was basically kill or be killed. If I tell you to kill one another, it's just like slavery as we know it is. African people. Exactly. I mean, it's, hey, if I tell you to kill, then you do it. You're gonna do it, yeah. And so, I think that it was important for them to understand that, hey, the God that we serve, our God, says that we are not to murder, right? And people always, want to finagle at the word. But I mean, so you telling me, then, what if somebody was after me and I just did this and then I killed him by mistake, whatever. That's not the same as murder. Murder takes intent, purposeful planning, and it comes at the expense of your being able to prepare for it, being able to plan it. So I think that we don't have to get too far into the word to understand it.
And I would just like to add, I do have some views that other people don't have that makes them uncomfortable, and that's okay. But that's like an avid reason, or one reason, that I am like totally against corporate punishment. And I do believe that some people do such horrible things that they don't deserve to be a part of society. But I also think that to play God and murder is against the Bible. And that's just what it says. And it's murder. And so I think that sometimes we have to think deeper into, when somebody does something, you're like, oh, if that was me, I would have to kill them. Like, you don't think like that, because sometimes in our brain, the association is if somebody does something bad to me, I have to kill them. If someone hurts me so deeply, I have to kill them in order to feel better about myself, or in order to feel like I've done something, in order to feel like I've gained some type of justice or something. It doesn't have to be that way. So I think that as we go forward in thinking, we should just really think about, like, do our thoughts and do our behaviors align with like what we believe in? Do we know what we believe in? Do we know what we're supposed to do if we say that we're Christian, if we say that we're walking in this light of God? Like, do we know all that entails?
And I think that that's another point, and not to belabor this, but because there would be some who would challenge you and say, oh, but in the Old Testament, God actually, according to his law, some of his results of his laws were murderous. He would have his people to stone people to death, or whatever the case may be.
You're going to get me excited on this.
What you got to understand, again, that is the sovereignty of God. Now, if you are questioning what my daughter is doing today, is questioning the position of mankind to make the decision that someone is deserving to be murdered. Now, if you're talking about in the Old Testament, where God, the creator of human life, God, the one who can sustain human life. We don't know how God in the end worked with mercy. We don't know how God did that, right? However, we should leave those affairs to God, right? Because in that essence, the people were only doing what they were instructed to do from the laws that they believed that they got from their God.
And I would just pull to the New Testament, when Jesus said, the first of you who hasn't sinned, you cast the first stone. Go ahead. Yes. Here's a stone. You do it, And I think that kind of shows what you're saying. It's like, now, if you got this from God, who is telling you that this is what you need to do, that's something else. But if you're making a decision from within yourself that this person is undeserving of life, and you haven't made a mistake, go ahead.
And that's it.
But
yes,
if this is coming from a place of hatred or, something, and you yourself have done something that could land you in that same position.
Yes.
That if you make one mistake, you could be in that position too.
Yes.
Then you're not fit to make this decision, right? So if you are capable of sin, which is all of us, maybe you shouldn't be the one deciding whose sin is bad enough that lands them death,
Exactly.
And I think that's that on that.
That's that on that. I mean, but that's a great, I believe that we just hem that up and put that
nice bow on top,
That was a nice bow placed on that.
So the next commandment is that you shall not commit adultery. So everyone hopefully knows what adultery is. It's when you're married and you have affairs with other people, or an affair, at least one affair with another person. And that is a very important commandment, because marriage is something that is like ordained through God. Like, this is a connection that you've now made. You got it signed off. You had a wedding or something of that sort, and you made this promise in front of everyone, in front of God, or at least in front of the person that you're marrying, that this is going to be it. This is who you're going to be with. This is the person that you're going to be with the rest of your life. This is who you love. And to go and almost like dishonor, which is basically what you're doing, that significant other with another person, is breaking that promise that you made with them, is breaking that promise that you made in front of God, and is basically saying that you don't care about everything that you did before that, because in this moment your urges aren't containable, aren't controllable. Yeah, exactly. So it's like in a moment you've broken everything that you did before that. So yeah.
And I think that one's, because it goes into one of the other commandments as well, what it does to community. And you got to understand, this is being said to a people that in this specific time were allowed to some extent to practice polygamy. So basically God is like, I mean, dang, you got 6 wives.
Right. Why you got to cheat on all of them? Right.
Why do you have to go over and do this over here? And that's why I said a lot of that gets into what you said about, the vows and everything that are made. But it also goes into another law, and you'll see it as we come up on it. I'll make sure to put a pin in it and stop there when we read it.
Okay. Cool. So we're on number 8. And number 8 is thou shalt not steal. So, pretty self-explanatory. Don't steal from other people.
Don't steal.
Well, you can only steal from other people. So don't steal,
if you steal from yourself,
you kind of sucks.
we know a special place for you.
We do. But yeah, just don't steal, and that can mean a lot of things. Don't steal physical things. I always think of it as not stealing somebody else's rights, not stealing somebody else's joy, not stealing. There are a lot of things that you can steal, but if it's not yours, don't mess with it. That's what my mom always told me. If it's not yours, don't touch it. That's how she taught us that commandment. So
if you didn't lose it, you can't find it.
Exactly.
I mean, we had all kinds of things, and we knew we were taking a chance at raising our children that other people would think that we were really weird. We even had some people, even some in our own family, who's like, you guys, that's just too much, and you think this and other. Well, look at them now. That's all I'll say about that. But the stealing piece, I think that's important. And it does, again, it plays into so many other things that you're going to hear about when we read that final commandment, and then we'll expound on it more.
Right. So the next one is you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor, which is super self-explanatory as well. Don't lie on other people. Exactly. Don't lie and say that they did something or
said something.
Yeah, I mean, there was a VeggieTales about that I could talk about if you want to. I can always
There's
talk
always
about
VeggieTales.
But don't lie on other people, because that can result really badly. And my mom, oh God, what did she say about a white lie? Something about how they always get bigger. There's no way to contain a little white lie. You tell one, and then you just have to tell a lie, and then you're in this pool of a mess. So don't lie, and then you don't have to continue to lie.
Yes. And I think, again, why would that change suddenly because Christ came to the earth is unknown to me. Right. Like, I would think that what the ones, especially that we have, been reading from from 4 down, because the first 3 really have more to do with God. And so God is allowed to handle those with whatever mercies that he desires. But the others, the reason why they're still intact is because they have more to do with us. And I think that that's just important to know. Okay. So the final one.
You can read it.
Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Oh, it was a period there. I thought it was going to keep going. But the idea of coveting, right? That means to strongly lust after something. Oh, you were going to...
I looked it up.
Okay, well, go right ahead.
It just means to yearn to possess or have something. So to have a desire to have something that doesn't belong to you. And
it's I mean, the strength that's put behind it in this particular verse, it really has more. It's like a lustful type of, I have to have it. I'm willing to kill you. I'm willing to lie on you. I'm willing to do whatever in order to get it. And that law is one of the tricky ones as well, because again, as Christians, we can easily cross that line. You're sitting in church one day and you just found out that Deacon so-and-so got a brand new car. And now all of a sudden you got to go out and get a brand new car, the same model. Why do you have to get it? You have no other reason other than the fact that you found out that he had it, which then meant you began to try to assume different things about him, how he's no better than you. You deserve what he deserves. Why shouldn't you have it? You didn't buy the new car because you needed it and your car that you were driving was just messed up. You didn't get it because, all your reasons for getting it had to do with someone else. And now you're trying to keep up with everyone else. And then you end up in trouble later on with God because it's a coveting. And that's not even a part of the stealing, that's just the coveting. Now, if you want it so strong that you're willing to go and take it from somebody else, now you've moved into the breaking of another. And when Jesus talks about this and sums it all up, he says that, if you're really going to live by the 10 Commandments, then you need to understand that all of us are sinners in that we've at least broken one. And that's being modest, right? Because truthfully, if you've broken one of them, you really broke all of them, right? And so I think it's important to note. And then you heard there too about the wife aspect. And that's why, the adultery really here is speaking about is really a spiritual adultery with God. God has already said that. Basically, I am your only God. And then he starts talking about what it's like to have an affair on him. You have an affair with other gods. Then when he brings it to us, he says, hey, the only way to do that is that you have to covet somebody else's something. And he says that will get you into trouble, because when you dig that deep in, now you're back at the sin of Cain with Abel. Cain coveted that. Now you're back at the sin of Eve and Adam with the tree, the fruit of knowledge, wisdom, right? And death. He says now you're getting into that. And so you have to make sure that you're not coveting, that you're not strongly lusting and yearning for something that does not belong to you, that you are willing to violate every principle of character possible in order to gain it.
So that's that on that, guys.
She's not even going to come in.
No, I'm not. No, I think you did that well, really well. I don't want to come ruin that. So those are the 10 Commandments. Imani and Dad style. I didn't mean to grab you that hard. I'm sorry.
Style. That's okay.
So
she still honors me.
I do. But yeah, hopefully you learned something. I learned something. Hopefully he learned something. And maybe Blaine learned something too.
Hey,
and hopefully you guys did. You all did too. So yeah, we're going to take a little break and then bounce back to the next show. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Bye. Hey, thanks for listening.
Make sure to check in with us next week, Saturday at 7:30.
Only on Worship Radio Detroit.